Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. You know, today we're going to be looking at something that I think is very relevant to everybody, finding your voice, specifically when you're put on the spot. You know those moments when you just have to think fast and talk smart. And we found a really great resource on this, a YouTube video from the Stanford Graduate School of Business called Think Fast, Talk Smart. And it is packed with insights from beginning to end. But one of the things that they start off with is a challenge. They ask you to count the number of F's in a sentence, which sounds pretty simple. But most people actually miss a few, which I think proves a point that even the sharpest minds can have blind spots. And that's where our expert comes in today. They really dug deep into this video and are here to share, I think, some of the most useful takeaways. So while we're chatting about this, I want you to think about a time that you were put on the spot to speak up. How'd it go? Did you nail it, or were you wishing that you could have done things a little differently?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think most of us dread public speaking, even if it's just like a quick comment in a meeting or something like that. And the video actually starts by acknowledging that fear. That something like 85% of people get nervous about speaking publicly. But the point isn't to pretend that we're not nervous, it's to learn how to manage those nerves.
Okay, because let's be honest, we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Heart-pounding palms are sweating.
Yeah.
So how do we keep those nerves in check?
Well, the video highlights 3 techniques, and they're all backed by research. So the first one is to kind of greet your anxiety. So instead of freaking out when you feel those physical symptoms, just acknowledge them. It's your body's natural response to a challenge.
So it's kind of like saying, hey, anxiety, I see you're here, but I got this.
Exactly. And then the next one is reframing. So instead of thinking about it as a performance, try shifting your mindset to a conversation. So even if it's a big audience, imagine you're just chatting with a group of people.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense because you're taking the pressure off of yourself to be perfect.
Right. And then the last technique is all about becoming present-oriented. So the video suggests things like tongue twisters, or even just like moving around a bit to get out of your head and into the moment. And there's a great example in the video where the speaker shares their favorite tongue twister, which is, I slit a sheet I slit, and on that slitted sheet, I sit.
Huh. Try saying that 5 times fast. It definitely makes you focus.
Yeah.
So you're basically using that tongue twister to distract yourself from all the what-ifs that are running through your head.
Exactly. It's just a mental trick to ground you in the present moment. And speaking of mental tricks, once you've kind of got that anxiety under control, the video presents a 4-step process for effective, spontaneous speaking.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. What's the first step?
All right, so the first step is get out of your own way. It's about letting go of the need to be perfect and embracing the unexpected. And the video uses a game called Shout the Wrong Name to illustrate this.
Shout the wrong name. Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. So you stand up, point to random objects, and you just shout out the wrong name for each one. But the thing is, our brains love patterns, so we instinctively try to win the game. We start planning our answers instead of just reacting authentically.
Wait, so the point is to force yourself to not overthink.
Yes.
That's almost counterintuitive, to be honest.
It is, but that's exactly why it works. And there's actually an improv maxim that goes along with this step. It's dare to be dull, which highlights how our desire to be brilliant can actually block us from being creative and genuine.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So by trying not to be clever, we might actually end up being more engaging.
Yeah, that's the idea. And then the second step builds on this and encourages us to view speaking opportunities as just that, opportunities, not challenges. And to demonstrate this shift in perspective, they use a fun game called the Imaginary Gift Exchange.
Imaginary gift exchange. Tell me more. This sounds fascinating.
Okay, so imagine you're exchanging imaginary gifts with someone. So you hand them a gift. They describe what they see inside, and then you have to come up with a reason why you chose that particular gift for them.
Ah, so you're put on the spot to be creative and justify your choice. And no time to overthink it. I can see how that would help you loosen up.
Exactly. It promotes that yes and mindset instead of a no but approach. And it makes the communication more collaborative and playful.
That makes so much sense. Instead of shutting down ideas, you're building on them.
Okay.
I'm already feeling more inspired. So what's the next step in this spontaneous speaking journey?
So the third step is all about slowing down and really listening to your audience. It's a reminder that understanding their needs and perspectives is crucial for effective communication. And the video uses a game called the spelling game to highlight this point.
Okay, spelling game. Now I'm really curious. How does spelling fit into all of this?
Well, imagine having a conversation about something fun, but you have to spell out every single word you say. It forces you to slow down and pay close attention, not just to what you're saying, but also to how the other person is responding.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's like you're hitting the pause button
Yeah.
on our usual rapid-fire way of communicating. I bet it completely changes the dynamic of a conversation.
It really does. And the maxim associated with this step is don't just do something, stand there. And it's a reminder to pause, listen thoughtfully, and then respond, rather than just reacting impulsively.
So it's about being present in the conversation, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
I love that. It seems like each step kind of builds on the one before it. Okay, so we've calmed our nerves, embraced spontaneity, and tuned into our audience. What's the final step in this process?
The final step brings everything together. Tell a story. The video emphasizes how crucial structure is for effective communication. Whether it's a formal presentation or just a casual chat, having a structure makes your message clearer and more memorable. Okay, but stories are supposed to flow naturally, right? Doesn't imposing a structure make them feel stiff and artificial?
That's a great question. Stories do flow naturally, but they also have an underlying structure that makes them compelling. Think of it like the foundation of a house. You don't see it, but it's what holds everything together. Structure helps the listener follow along and absorb information more easily. The video even uses the example of phone numbers. We break them into groups of 3 or 4 digits because it's easier to remember that way.
That's a great analogy. It's like chunking information into bite-sized pieces so our brains can process it more efficiently. So how can we apply this to storytelling? What kind of structures are we talking about?
So the video introduces 2 structures that are particularly helpful for spontaneous speaking. The first is problem, opportunity, solution, benefit. So you start by laying out the problem or the opportunity. Then you present your solution. And finally, you highlight the benefits. It's a classic structure that's incredibly effective and easy to follow. Ah, that reminds me of those classic infomercials. They hook you with a problem, then present their product as the miracle solution, and finally show you how amazing your life will be after you buy it.
Exactly. It's a time-tested formula, and it works just as well in everyday conversations. And the second structure is what? So what? Now what? And this is perfect for explaining a new concept. So you start by defining it, then you explain why it's important, and finally you outline the next steps.
I love that. It's like a roadmap that guides the listener through the information. So are there any examples in the video of how these structures work in practice?
Yeah, there's a great anecdote where the speaker talks about their experience as a Stanford tour guide. And the most important lesson they learned was to never lose your tour group, which is a metaphor for keeping your audience engaged. And they realized that by providing structure and signposting where they were going, they could keep the group interested and prevent them from getting lost or bored.
That makes so much sense. I can imagine how frustrating it would be to be on a tour where the guide is just rambling on without any clear direction. It's like being lost in a forest without a map.
Exactly. And to bring these structures to life, the video uses a fun activity called Selling a Slinky. And participants have to use one of the 2 structures to come up with a compelling sales pitch for a Slinky toy.
Selling a Slinky. That sounds like a hilarious challenge. I can only imagine the creative pitches people came up with.
Yeah, it's a great way to practice applying those structures in a low-stakes environment. And the idea is to make using these structures second nature. So when you're in a real-life spontaneous speaking situation, you don't have to think about how to structure your response. It just flows naturally.
So it's about internalizing those frameworks so you can focus on the content of what you're saying, not the delivery.
Precisely. And the amazing thing is, structure, far from being restrictive, actually makes you more spontaneous and engaging. It frees up your mind to be creative and connect with your audience on a deeper level. Wow, I love that. So the key takeaway here is that structure is not the enemy of spontaneity. In fact, it's the secret weapon. Wow, I love that.
So the key takeaway here is that structure is not the enemy of spontaneity. In fact, it's the secret weapon. This deep dive has been amazing. I'm really struck by how this video demystifies spontaneous speaking. It's not about some magical talent. It's about having a toolkit. And we've uncovered some great tools today.
Absolutely. And what I find so effective is the combination of the research, the real-world examples, and those fun activities. It makes the learning process so engaging and memorable.
Totally. So for our listener, let's recap those 4 steps. To unlock your spontaneous speaking superpower, the first step was to get out of your own way, to silence that inner critic and embrace imperfection.
Right. And remember the maxim, dare to be dull. Sometimes trying too hard to be brilliant can backfire.
Step 2 was all about shifting your perspective. Instead of viewing speaking opportunities as these stressful challenges, we can reframe them as chances to connect and share our ideas. And that yes and mindset is so powerful, it keeps the communication flowing and encourages collaboration even in unexpected situations.
Step 3 was a game changer for me. Slow down and listen. Don't just react. Take a moment to absorb what the other person is saying. It's about being present in the conversation, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Absolutely. Don't just do something, stand there. Such a simple phrase, but it reminds us of the power of truly listening before responding.
And finally, step 4 was to tell a story with structure. We learned about those two incredibly useful frameworks: problem, opportunity, solution, benefit, and what. So what? Now what? I'm already thinking about how I can use those in my everyday conversation.
Me too. And remember, those structures aren't about being rigid. They're about providing a framework that actually frees you up to be more creative and spontaneous.
Exactly. It's like the structure handles the how of communication, so you can focus on the what. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I'm curious for our listener, what everyday interactions could you approach with more structure and intention? Maybe try out one of those frameworks we discussed and see how it changes things. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of spontaneous communication. Until next time, keep diving deep. So the key takeaway here is that structure is not the enemy of spontaneity. In fact, it's the secret weapon. This deep dive has been amazing.
It really has.
I'm really struck by how this video demystifies spontaneous speaking. It's not about some magical talent. It's about having a toolkit. And we've uncovered some great tools today.
Yeah, we have.
So for our listener, let's recap those 4 steps to unlock your spontaneous speaking superpower. The first step was to get out of your own way, to silence that inner critic and embrace imperfection.
Right. And remember the maxim, dare to be dull. Sometimes trying too hard to be brilliant can backfire.
Totally. Step 2 was all about shifting your perspective. Instead of viewing speaking opportunities as these stressful challenges, we can reframe them as chances to connect and share our ideas.
Yeah, and that yes and mindset is so powerful. It keeps the communication flowing and encourages collaboration even in unexpected situations.
Absolutely. Step 3 was a game changer for me. Slow down and listen. Don't just react. Take a moment to absorb what the other person is saying. It's about being present in the conversation, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Right. Don't just do something, stand there. Such a simple phrase, but so powerful.
I know, it's so true. And finally, step 4 was to tell a story with structure. And we learned about those 2 incredibly useful frameworks: problem, opportunity, solution, benefit, and what. So what? Now what? I'm already thinking about how I can use those in my everyday conversations.
Me too.
It's really about providing a framework that actually frees you up to be more creative and spontaneous.
Right. It takes care of the how so you can focus on the what.
Exactly. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
Wait a
I'm curious for our listener, what everyday interactions could you approach with more structure and intention? Maybe try out one of those frameworks we discussed and see how it changes things. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving deep.